Hello, everyone. My name is Britt Burnham, and I'm the Manager of Community Services at the district. And I'm joined today by Christine Culham, our CAO, and Troy Ziegler, our Director of Finance. So before I pass it over to Troy, he's going to take you through about a 20-minute overview of our budget, our proposed budget for 2021. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A session for the remainder of our time tonight. The Q&A function within this Zoom webinar is just through the Q&A dialog bubble on the bottom of your screen or the chat function. And I'll just be able to read those questions and I'll give them to Troy after his presentation. So our draft budget today was just published online last week and it's open for comments until March 10th. So after the session, you're welcome to go onto our Let's Talk Budget 2021 site and provide feedback to us that way, or you can also reach out and email Troy after the session with your feedback. Everything will be summarized for council anonymously so that they do see the community's reaction to the budget and questions for them. So anyways, I'll pass this over to Troy. I think you'll find this a really informative presentation and a good way to spend a really cold evening cuddled up and learning about your local budget. So take it away, Troy.
Thank you, Britt, and thanks to everyone who's online. We've had good engagement to date and feedback, so thanks very much for taking time out of your busy day to hear this and provide feedback. Appreciate that. It's a very important part of our budget process and helps inform council about what the public thinks, which is great, so thanks again. As Britt said, I've got about a slide deck to go through, about 20 minutes, so we'll go through that and then happy to answer questions. So first slide is how we develop the budget. The official community plan really guides us in our strategies. As some of you may know, the official community plan is in the current process of being updated. That goes into our council strategic plan. And we just went through a planning session with council late last year. So they've updated the strategic planning for 2022 and 2023, or pardon me, 2021, 2022 to the end of this election term. That strategic planning then feeds into our budget regarding specific projects or initiatives and service plans that we include in our budget, which we've done for this year's budget. And that ends up in the process that we're in currently in the creation of the draft budget and the 5-year financial plan. From that budget, after this budget gets adopted and we go through the year, there is reporting to council. There's a mid-year report on progress on initiatives. And we also do a quarterly financial report for Q2 and Q3, typically in July or August for Q2, and then in October or November for Q3. And those are just touching base with council so they know kind of how things are progressing through the year. The strategic planning I mentioned for council, this was the outcome of that strategic plan, where there was 4 significant initiatives that came out of that strategic planning with, I'll call them small vision statements for each plan, and a number of projects or initiatives under each. Some of the ones I'll touch on, the active transportation plan, very important for the community that's being developed currently, should be completed later this year, and that's going to also feed into our future years budgets and financial planning initiatives. The Keating Flyover project, most of you are probably aware of the provincial government. We're working with them now, and we'll be updating, doing a large flyover at the Keating Crossroad. That project's also connected to a large sewer project for the district that we'll be doing at the same time as that while everything's being done. Under investing in climate, there's a waste collection study. There has been feedback from the community just regarding the collection in the community and how it could be improved. So council wanted to look at that a little further. So we're going to be doing a study on that. Under managing responsible growth, we've got the official community plan, which we've mentioned already. And we are due for an update. Our sustainable asset management plan and related long-term financial plan are due for an update this year. So we'll be starting that this year as well. And that'll be a good update and as well take into new initiatives such as the active transportation plan. And the Parks Master Plan is due for an update as well. Just a general sense of the timeline for budget. It seems like we're always working on budget. There's only a few months off, really. Typically in June or in the summertime each year, we provide council with a budget guideline, if you will, or the principles about how we're going forward. This year, it was a status quo budget, meaning no significant changes in services or staffing. We work on the budget starting in September and October, compiling that draft budget for council. I mentioned before the Q3 reports typically get done in October. Late in the year, November, December is when we're actually compiling the budget itself and presenting to the community like we are now in January, February for feedback. And then typically the council presentations are over several meetings in February and March, with typical adoption of the budget around April. There is a statutory deadline for budgets for municipalities that has to be completed, and the bylaw with rates, the statutory deadline for that is May 15th. Some municipalities go quicker than others. There's a couple of municipalities I think that have already adopted their budget, but most municipalities do it a similar time frame to us. Just a little bit about municipal finances, if you will, Budget 101. Municipal financing and accounting is typically a little more complicated than most of your typical business. We have typically 7 companies or funds, we call them, within each municipality. Under operating funds would be our general operations, including police, fire, public works, things like that. Water and sewer utilities also have their own separate operating funds. Capital funds is similar. It has the 3. It has general capital funds, water capital, and sewer capital, and mainly because they have different funding sources. Water and sewer, of course, are funded from the user rates for those funds, and general capital is funded from taxation and other sources and reserves. Lastly, we have reserves funds, which is all the funds that we put away now for future infrastructure projects, or different operating reserves that are established for supporting future operations. And they're accounted for, as 7 different distinct companies. A bit about our services. Services that Central Saanich provides, a lot of the general administration categories we talk about: legislative and administrative services, finances and licensing, police and fire protection, planning and building inspections, bylaw enforcement, parks, communications and civic engagement, civil engineering, and our public works yard, which is over on Benvenuto, Keating Crossroad. And they've spread all of this, the major services: drain pipes, water, sewer, parks, drainage, things like that. Those are the kind of the things the community relies on. We also manage a fleet of approximately 70 vehicles, and our public works yard has a garage and a fleet section that manages the maintenance of all those vehicles. This is how we fund our budget. We're a small community. We don't have compared to other municipalities, we don't have as diverse a revenue source as some, like parking or recreation revenues, things like that. So as you can see from this slide, 73 or almost 74% of our revenues for the year come from taxation. Smaller percentages, reimbursements for our services that we provide to other areas, government transfers, and things like that. Smaller for one's grants. Capital grants can be significant, but for general operations, grants are less. Our licensing, of course, licensing fees, building permit fees, things like that are an important factor as well. Water and sewer utilities, of course, important to all residents. Cost to replace infrastructure, and that includes the CRD bulk water that we purchase from the CRD each year, and the CRD sanitary sewer treatment. This year, we do, with our water and sewer, they have rate increases each year of approximately 5%, pardon me. And that is to, as with our other transfers to reserves for capital and sustainable asset management, those rate increases go to increasing those transfers to reserves and our future infrastructure replacement. So this year, with those rate increases in both sewer and water, sewer The sewer increase to the average home is estimated at 4.6%, and water utility estimated at 2%. The draft budget summary. So as we mentioned, it is a status quo budget. Total revenues are projected just over 32 million. The budget goals are to maintain level of core services needed, address priorities of council such as climate action, wildlife protection plan, OCP review, active transportation, and others. Account for inflation and funding for first responders. If I had to summarize our budget this year, again, it's a status quo budget. The fire department has a 6-year service plan, and we're in the fourth year of that plan. So there's increases in our fire service because of that. And other than that, there's one position that we're asking council to add for climate action initiatives. And those are the major changes for this year. Municipal operating breakdown. So 28% for general government. That would be all of our accounting, legislative services, planning department, engineering, those kinds of things. Police department is a big chunk of our budget, 26%. Transfers to reserves, the other one to note, we fund primarily almost all of our capital through reserves. So rather than funding, having fluctuations in our capital budget from year to year, depending on what's going on, we have a kind of a steady and increasing transfers to reserve each year, and that goes to fund future replacement. So that's a big chunk of our budget. And again, it is increasing over time, where I think we're in the 4th or 5th year of a 15-year plan to get towards where we need to be for an annual sustainable replacement budget. This is our capital plan. So just over the next 5 years, gives you a bit of a sense of where we're focusing. There's some significant sewer project. I mentioned the one down by Highway 17. When the flyover happens, there's a significant project there that's required. There's also the Brentwood Hagen project that is being planned for the near future. That is dependent on a grant. We hope that comes through because there's some active transportation components of that. But again, the major component there is sewer and roads, and some buildings as well. The water system right now is in good shape. We don't have a lot of current main replacement. There is some upgrades that we're looking at for future years for pressure zones, and that'll be part of our sustainable asset management review and long-term financing to see how we can fund that work. Tax increase to the average home. The average home in Central Saanich is around $750,000. And from 2020 to 2021, the BC assessment increase was averaged at about 4.6% or 5%. So the average increase to that home is $62 this year, or represent a 2.97% increase in municipal taxes. That breaks down into actually about 0 or a slight decrease to overall operations, keeping current service levels. 1.57% for infrastructure replacement. That's the transfers to reserves that I mentioned before, and 1.57% for policing. The policing increase this year was a little larger than normal, and they're dealing with all police forces across BC. There's issues with ongoing health and safety claims. That's impacted most police departments, so that's a factor there, as well as getting up to funding levels they require to do the work and the overtime that they require. The district, I think it's on the next slide here. The district, so for taxes for the average home that I mentioned is for this year will be roughly $4,000, just over $4,000 before homeowner grants. But of that $4,000, only about $2,100 of that comes to the municipality, and the other approximately $1,900 or $1,950 is for other levy authorities, we call them. So school taxes, Capital Regional District, Capital Regional Hospital District, BC Transit, and Municipal Finance Authority are all included in your tax bill that you pay to your municipality. And I think a lot of times it's easy to forget that of your tax bill to the municipality, about half of that is for us and half for other authorities. Other factors just, that we've taken into account for the 2021 budget: pandemic impact and the recovery grant. We did get a large federal provincial grant of just over 3.4 million to assist the municipality with the impacts of the pandemic, lost revenues, increased expenses, so that we can continue to deliver the services that we do. Wage and benefit cost inflation is obviously taken into account. The staffing capacity and services that come out of our strategic planning with council, water rates and sewer rates with asset management that we talked a little bit about, infrastructure replacement funding, debt, and projects and strategic initiatives. Sorry, this is a bit of a busy slide, but the COVID Safe Restart Grant that I just mentioned from the federal provincial government, it is a conditional grant, meaning we can't use it for whatever we want. The province has a kind of a umbrella-based approach or kind of a guideline of what these can be used for. And essentially, they're for direct impacts of COVID on the municipality, additional costs we've incurred, again, lost revenues, increased expenses, signage, any closing down or reopenings of buildings, emergency planning costs, bylaw enforcement. You get that a little bit more in the news these days in different provinces. The district has an increased enforcement team for that with the ongoing pandemic. Changing our operations, some people working remotely and doing these kind of things, virtual connection with the community and also internally as well. There's costs there. There's also allowances for whether it's done directly through a municipality or whether we help it through the community through nonprofits or things to help provide services to those of the vulnerable people and other related costs. So really that, again, for the outside organizations, there's been a bit of talk around that. It's really for looking for ones that have been impacted, that the language from the provinces provide core community services or providing services to vulnerable persons. So the 2020 expenses that we incurred from that are being covered from that grant. And we have included amounts in our 2021 through 2023 budget currently for eligible costs that can be covered by that grant, somewhat assisting our tax increase. Pre-budget survey, again, we're really happy with the turnout we've got and the volume of feedback we've got this year so far. We had the pre-budget survey, and there was some multiple choice questions, and this is where we are so far with how would you like the district to balance the services that we offer and the property tax increase? So 49% say maintains kind of a status quo approach, maintain services with a typical 3 to 5% tax increase. 32% have said invest more in community priorities, active transportation, road safety, things like that, with a possible higher tax increase. 15% want to see a reduced typical tax increase or services as well. I thought this was a neat slide. Active transportation seems to be a very popular topic these days. And this was when you're, again, from the pre-budget survey, people selecting the things that are most important to them. As you can see, their active transportation, the big winner. Parks and new amenities and road construction are the top three. Climate action and environmental projects in fourth. The district has had, I mentioned before about acting a climate action specialist position to our workforce. The district has had a staff member for the last couple of years that has been funded through a federal grant. And now they've done great work to date, and we're wanting that work to continue. So we'll be asking council to make that position permanent. Thanks very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I think Britt has one quick point on other things happening in our municipality before we can open it up to some questions and answers.
Thank you. Thanks, Troy. So on the next slide here, it hasn't actually come up on the screen, but I can see it over there on your screen, Troy. I was just going to ask that if you want to go to the Let's Talk site while you're checking it out and looking at the budget. There we go. At the budget page, we have a number of other engagements happening right now. It's a really interesting time at the district, and there's lots of ways to share your input on the future of the community. Our tree bylaw is actually wrapping up the public engagement portion on the draft tree bylaw. Ends on February 15th. So if you haven't checked that out and you're interested in it, you might want to pop over there and just have a quick look at it and get your feedback in by Monday. Our active transportation plan that we've been working on for the last couple of years, the draft is going to be released in 2 weeks. So we're really excited about that. You can go to that project page, you can subscribe for updates, and you'll be notified as it's released, and opportunities to have input on the draft. And our official community plan, we update our official community plan about every 10 to 15 years, and we're updating it right now. Our current OCP was written in 2008, so it's time to update it based on the vision that we want to identify for the future of the community. It's a really important conversation, and we've just launched the first piece of the OCP engagement today. It's a big ideas contest that you can check out on the Let's Talk site, and it's just kind of warming the community up for the bigger rollout of the engagement, which will start in March. So that would be another one. If you want to subscribe for updates, there will be many updates over the next year while we work on that plan. So now that I'm done my little public service announcement, I see we have a question. Troy, how does the budget adjust with community feedback? Do you do more, do less, make it the same?
Good question. So that's, us in general administration and accounting, we compile the draft budget. That's we talked about earlier about some council input, strategic planning, and the public engagement comes into the effect when it goes to mayor and council. We've presented a budget, and they need that public feedback to know, how are we looking? Are we doing the strategic projects and pointing in some of the area that community wants, active transportation, parks, things like that, and gives them a sense of feedback of the tax increase. I mean, and it's through that public engagement and that feedback and our presentations to council as we go through, where they make decisions about again, increasing the budget to fund active transportation more aggressively, or cut services and taxes due to difficult financial times, or stay status quo. Those are the process that we go through with council and the public feedback that's provided to them.
Thank you. Troy, can you talk about regionally how our tax increase in our budget compares to other municipalities in the region?
Sure, thanks. The municipalities in the CRD, we're pretty good at working together. On the finance side, we touch base with each other regularly. There was some talk recently, and I think with us coming in to start at 2.97 is a pretty good place. Other municipalities, I think Victoria was just approved. They're at just below 2%. The average that people are, the other finance folks in other municipalities are saying so far is around 4%. And I would say the majority, if not all of the municipalities, are going forward with a status quo budget. No real significant increase for most, except for those communities like Oak Bay and others who have been on the news and things where I talked about the asset management planning and the funding for that. Some municipalities are a little later than others in starting in that funding to get up to a sustainable level. So some that are behind are taking a more aggressive approach and have, say, a 1.5 or 2% tax increase every year dedicated towards that capital replacement. So ones that are more on track, we have a 1% for infrastructure funding, We also have some in Central Saanich for equipment and vehicles and things like that increase a little bit over a year until we get to a more sustainable level. But again, in the region, I think it's around 4% on average, but it does vary a little bit from community to community.
And a follow-up question, could you educate us a little bit about our commercial tax rate and how that compares in the region?
General, our tax philosophy in Central Saanich is that everyone has an even increase. So at a 2.97% increase, we try and make it so that that's the same increase across residential and business. So there are even some municipalities take a different approach depending on your the balance of business and residents within your community. For our overall tax bill, I believe it's around low 70, 72 or 73% of our overall taxes comes from residential properties. The other remaining 27, 28% come from businesses. Our tax rate is low in comparison. Last year, when I did a review of other tax rates in the community, we were, I think, in the either the lowest or second lowest tax rate within the region. And again, it really depends on the community and their tax philosophy, whether they want to put more on the residents or put more on the business, or keep it as kind of a level playing field, if you will, like us, where we say it's level for all.
Thank you. Could you tell us about any active transportation projects that are in the budget this year?
Sure, thanks, Britt. There are a couple significant ones. Both are dependent on grants. Our Benvenuto path. Britt, you might be able to speak more about the specifics of the path and the logistics, but the Benvenuto path is in the budget. That's, I believe, about $320,000, and it spans over 2021 and 2022. There's also, we just announced recently, we applied for a grant for just over $1 million for some active transportation planning around the 4 schools in Central Saanich and pedestrian infrastructure around those schools, sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, lighting, things like that. So we're very hopeful that that we'll get both those grants and to be able to start those active transportation projects this year. Just on a side note, for as far as the overall budget for Central Saanich and active transportation and new initiatives, that's why we're doing our update of our asset management plan and long-term financial planning, because the current plan we have is just for existing infrastructure, water pipes, sewer pipes, roads, those sorts of things. We need to expand that in our asset management plan and financial planning to look a little bit further into what's coming in the future and the wants and needs of the community for active transportation and how that can be incorporated.
Thank you. So I don't see any other questions waiting at the moment. If anyone had a question that they wanted to ask, you can type it in the Q&A function at the bottom. You could also click on raise your hand if you want to ask it verbally, and we could just invite you to unmute yourself if it's easier for you to ask your question that way. And if there aren't any other questions, then we'll just thank you, Troy, for the presentation, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope you found that to be really informative and a good use of your evening. And please do go to the Let's Talk site and share your questions or comments with us. And you can also find Troy's contact information there. If you think of a question tomorrow morning or what have you, then feel free to reach out and he'll be happy to respond. So thank you, everybody, very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.